Unit 3, secondary treatment of sewage. We are going to see about activated sludge process. It is an aerobic process. In this process, we are going to do aeration process. The most common suspended growth process which is used for municipal wastewater treatment is the activated sludge process. The flow diagram, you can see the wastewater entered into the preliminary treatment. We know the function of the preliminary treatment. Screening, rich chamber and all is done in the preliminary treatment, and then the water gets settled down by primary sedimentation tank, which here we mention it as primary treatment. The primary treatment involves primary sedimentation tank and also named as primary clarifier. The remaining sludge, the water gets settled down in the primary clarifier, the process known as clarification process. The remaining sludge, which creates a sludge bed, is allowed for the treatment and the disposal. The treated wastewater is applied to the aeration tank, where the aeration process is done by supplying oxygen through diffuser, sprayer or through nozzles, etc. The water gets aerated. We know BOD, biological oxygen demand. Here the biological oxygen demand is get reduced because oxygen, we are supplying the oxygen, so the demand gets reduced, and the aerated water, aerated wastewater is supplied to secondary clarifier as a secondary treatment. Here the same as like a primary clarifier, the sludge is settled down into the recycle process. This is known as activated sludge. The waste is recycled back again and again till the sludge percentage gets decreased. And finally, the treated water is supplied to the tertiary treatment and the water gets treated out. Activated sludge plant involves wastewater aeration in the presence of a microbial suspension. Solid liquid gets separated. Clarified effluent is get discharged. The effluent is just clarified. Wasting of excess biomass and return of remaining biomass to the aeration. The process is done by repeatedly. The process involves air or oxygen being introduced into a mixture of primary treated or screened sewage or industrial wastewater combined with organisms to develop a biological floc which reduces the organic content of the sewage. The combination of wastewater and biological mass is commonly known as mixed liquor. In all activated sludge plant, once the wastewater has received sufficient treatment, excess mixed liquor, that is a combination of wastewater and the biological mass, is discharged into settling tanks and the treated supernet. Supernet is nothing but, in the primary clarifier we can see the water gets settled down as a sludge, and the water is named as supernet liquid as it is run off to undergo further treatment before discharge. We have already seen about the activated sludge water treatment flow diagram. Part of the settled material, the sludge, is returned to the head of the aeration system to receive the new wastewater entering the tank. This fraction of the floc is called return activated sludge. The excess sludge is called surplus activated sludge or waste activated sludge. This surplus activated sludge is removed from the treatment process to keep the ratio of biomass to food supplied in the wastewater in balance. It is stored in sludge tank and is further treated by digestion either under anaerobic or aerobic conditions prior to disposal. Some of the advantages of activated sludge process. There are a lot of advantages. One is disperse, can be used for one household. It removes organics, can be achieved by oxidation nitrification. Biological nitrification is done without adding chemicals. Phosphorus removal is done. Solids liquids separation. Stabilization of sludge is capable of removing 97% of suspended solids. Is most widely used in wastewater treatment process. The major disadvantage in activated sludge process is the color. We know the color of the wastewater is black water or grey water. Here the water level the color of the range gets increased rather than getting decreased by oxidation process. It does not remove nutrients. The problem of getting well settled sludge. Recycled biomass keeps high biomass concentration in aeration tanks. Some of the types of the activated sludge. One of the types is plug flow. The image we can see the two clarifier. the general process. It is routed through a series of channels constructed in the aeration basin. Wastewater flows to the tank and is treated as it winds its way through the trunk. As the water goes through the system, BOD and organic concentration are greatly reduced. Variation to this method, which includes adding return sludge under a decreasing amount at various locations along the length of the tank, wastewater BOD is reduced as it passes through the tank. Air requirement and number of bacteria required also decreasing accordingly. Complete mix, looking into the flow diagram of the complete mix, there is no clarifier comparing to the plug flow or the actual activated sludge diagram. There is only one clarifier. The influent is directly applied to the aeration basin and then the water gets clarified. Return sludge is repeated again. The wastewater may be immediately mixed throughout the entire content of the aeration basin. So most common method, since the water is completely mixed with bacteria and oxygen, the volatile suspended solids concentration and the oxygen demand are the same throughout the process. Contact stabilization. Microorganisms consume organics in the contact tank. The raw water flows into the contact tank where it is aerated and mixed with bacteria. Soluble material pass through bacterial cell walls while insoluble materials stick to the outside. Solids settle out later and wasted from system or return to a stabilization tank. Microbes digest organics in the stabilization tank and then recycle back to the contact tank because they need more food. In the flow diagram of the contact stabilization, we can see the influent is directly passed to the contact tank and then to the clarifier. After the sludge gets returned back to the contact, there is a tank called stabilization tank where the concentration level is maintained and sent back to the contact tank. Because of the size of the contact tank is smaller, retention time is minimized. The volume requirements are also smaller because the basin receives only concentrated return sludge. There is no incoming raw wastewater. Often, no primary clarifier before the contact tank due to the rapid uptake of soluble and insoluble food. External aeration, we have seen about aeration tank. The extended part is the aeration is done for a long period. It is used to treat industrial wastewater containing soluble organics that need long retention time. This is same as complete mix, just as longer aeration. The main advantage is the long retention time in the aeration tank, which provides equalization to absorb sudden or temporary shock loads. Less sludge is generally produced because some of the bacteria are digested in the aeration tank, one of the simpler modification to operate. The design consideration we have to see here is the wastewater characteristics, the quality and the wastewater characteristics of the wastewater, and also the quality and characteristics of the treated water, the type of the reactor which we use, the volumetric and organic loading that will be applied to the reactor, and the amount of oxygen which requires, and the amount of oxygen provided, and the support mixing. The quantity of sludge will be generated and wasted for its further management. Besides these nutrition requirement of microbes, environmental conditions under which plant operated. Design steps: aeration tanks, volume and dimension of secondary settling tank, amount of oxygen required and the power needed. Quantity of sludge will be produced for particular waste and the treatment condition. So in the problems we use the design criteria. In the aeration tank, if we want to design aeration tank for small plant, we design number of aeration tanks as 2. For the large plant, we design 4 number of tanks. The depth of wastewater in tank must be provided. For the usual tank, around 3 to 4.5 meter. For diffuse aeration, around 4.5 to 7.5 meter. For surface aeration, around 1 to 6 meter. For the freeboard, in diffuse aeration, we may provide around 0.3 to 6 meter. For surface aeration, we may provide around 1 to 1.5 meter. The rectangular aeration tank L is to B is equal to 5 is to 1, B is to D ratio 3 is to 1 to 4 is to 1, depends on the aeration system. Air requirement depends on F by M ratio, which is food by microorganism ratio, which is less than or equal to 0.3 or greater than or equal to 0.3, which means food by microorganisms. We feed the microorganisms before aeration. So air needs about 20 to 55 meter cube or 72,115 meter cube. Power required 10 to 14 kilowatt per 1000 meter cube of tank volume. So the thing we have to remember about activated sludge process, it is an aerobic process and the aeration is done in the aeration tank.